But what breaks that loop is not a singular moment. Not like, oh, one day I've kind of figured it all out. Now I'm going to be patient at these times. What breaks that loop? So impatience is like an impulse. Impulses move very, very rapidly. They move faster than your thoughts, right? Thinking is slow. Thinking fast and slow, right? The slow thinking is the conscious thoughts, right? The thinking fast part is not actual thinking. It's reactivity. It's impulsivity. So yeah, those impulses for impatience move at the speed of lightning, in a sense, move at the speed of light. So how do you break that loop? But what breaks that loop is not a singular moment. Not like, oh, one day I've kind of figured it all out. Now I'm going to be patient at these times. It's like, no. It's like building muscle. It's going to take reps, sequencing, day over day. How to keep the big picture in the mind, constantly. So I think part of the question here is maybe you get kind of too sucked into trade by trade, wanting to make money and kind of losing the bigger picture, which is execution matters more than money in the short term. Money matters more in the long term. Okay. But short term, that bigger picture perspective oftentimes gets flipped. You're caring too much about money in the short term. And then that disrupts executions. If you're really going to train this bigger picture perspective, you got to get the reminders in there regularly, right? So trading becomes an exercise in development, right? It becomes, you're kind of learning at the same time that you are actually trading.
Being a college student where you hardly earn, you don't even earn money, and you're just your earnings are based off your parents and stuff. Losing 20,000 in a single day is something which was very big to me. I was down close to 2 or 3 lakhs INR, and that was entirely my parents' money, and I had never informed them about it as well.
तो एक मेरा ड्रीम था कि भाई डॉक्टर बने, लेकिन वो कहाँ डॉक्टर से ये गुज्जी लाइन हमारे जैसा ट्रेडिंग में आ गया। आधी रात को उठ के पहाड़ी देखता था। मतलब ये पहाड़ में क्या करता है? बस ऐसा पहाड़ जैसा माउंटेन्स जैसा होता था। तो मैं बोलती थी ये क्या टाइम पास करता है। मुझे लगता था वो कुछ वीडियो गेम खेलता है ना बच्चे, उस हिसाब से वो गेम खेल रहा है।
I am proud of him because he gave me PS5.
Money has not changed him as a person. He is still the same sweet, caring, humble person he was 5 years ago.
He's someone who will not stick on one thing forever.
His research techniques and his precision was always something that everyone in our company appreciated.
People over here are just trying to earn money through it, and that is the main reason why they are failing. And I feel that learning is something which is much more important over time. It helps you be a better individual in the trading part as well.
What is up, everyone? Good to be here for another session. Today, talking about a really painful loop, different one than what we were just watching about, breaking out of patterns of impatience and revenge. This loop is you do great and then crash. The boom and bust cycles, the cycles that kind of keep you trapped and unable to really not just break through, but break through with some velocity that can keep you moving forward. So we're gonna talk about that today. Great to be back, and I'm just curious, throw in the chat. Those of you on Twitter, throw in the comments. Let me know how you're doing. I am genuinely curious how you all are doing today. It's good to be back. I am ramping up for my next big golf tournament. Play a couple big ones every year. This is the U.S. Mid-Am. A couple weeks. Qualify for that. I get to go out to Arizona and play in the national championship. So, I'm excited for that. Quick little recap. It was nice to see some of those clips from last session talking about impatience and the need to build better discipline. I would argue that there's some really key principles in that session. If you haven't watched it all the way through, I would suggest you do that, because it's very easy for many of you to get caught in wrong views of discipline. And in particular, what I mean is that you think that you have discipline problems when you actually have emotional problems. And when you do have discipline problems, purely don't really understand the need to build the reps and build the skill, much like you do when you're building muscle in the gym or building endurance or building any other skill, right? Nobody either has discipline or doesn't, right? That's sort of an imperfect way of viewing it. Discipline is really a measure against your goals. Are you working in the right way towards your goals or not? And if you are, then sometimes there's still emotion in the way that makes it look like you're not. So that's the key differentiation that's really required. So I see somebody watching from Arizona. That's awesome. Well, hopefully I'll be in your home state come the fall. And I appreciate the comments on my shirt. Try to keep it a little festive for the summertime, at least here in the U.S. All right. So as was the case from the last few sessions, like my job primarily today is to answer questions for you all, to respond to issues that you're having, topics that you want to hear more about, to address problems that you're having in your trading, maybe today, or ones that that have happened more recently. But before we do that, and I should say, well, you can always throw your comments and questions and topics in the chat at any point, and I'll get to them shortly, kind of after my opening remarks about these boom and bust cycles that, they're just brutal. I think demoralizing is a common word. Deflating, like when they keep kind of happening again and again, where you're really doing well, and then just to kind of get yourself undercutted, you have 2, 3, 4 weeks of profitability, maybe getting a payout, getting close to payouts, and then to just kind of blow your account and or like lose a large chunk of it, seemingly inexplicably. You don't really know exactly like kind of why it happened or what went wrong. You just know that, what seemed like you being in a really good spot kind of tumbled, and then things can kind of get worse and accelerated on top of that. But it's inexplicable, and if you don't really know why it happened, it can be really hard to pull yourself back up and to kind of keep fighting. And I genuinely don't want any of you to be in this spot, because it's just hard. The mental game and your emotions can really get very, very intense in these cycles. And that's kind of part of the reason why you end up stuck in here. So let me just kind of describe a handful of examples of what I've seen. And the first one is that you will get into that pocket where you're doing quite well. The problem is it's very easy for, day after day of winning to begin to get a bit overconfident. And when that overconfidence accelerates, it means that you're not trading with the same kind of sophistication, the same kind of clarity, the same kind of precision. Your risk management gets a little bit loose. You maybe allow yourself to hold on to a position a little bit longer. Maybe you're able to jump into a position a little bit sooner, even though all your criteria haven't quite been met. And so when that happens, you might not really get punished by it. And that's kind of how the market works, right? You're not always going to get exact feedback. You're not going to get the negative response of you not performing quite as well immediately. So then when losses start happening, maybe even from a good trade that just turned out not to work, because that can happen, right? These are sometimes coin flips. sometimes better than that, but they're still going to fail at times. Well, then once that first loss happens, it can kind of burst the bubble a little bit, and I oftentimes imagine this like a cartoon character. I mean, I grew up on, Looney Tunes and Bugs Bunny, and, can picture Bugs Bunny like running off of a cliff, not really realizing, or I actually guess it was the coyote running off a cliff, not really realizing that he had. And then, of course, once they do, well, then, kind of nosediving and crashing. That's the thing. So like when you're overconfident, you effectively kind of run off the cliff. And then as soon as that bubble bursts, it's going to, take you down pretty swiftly. And so that's where the crash occurs. And the crash can include, obviously, the revenge trading. It can include a lot of anger. It can include more fear and hesitation. You're going to take breaks, to try to get yourself back in the right state of mind. But sometimes it can be, a very severe crash where the buying more accounts and, just we'll just say kind of throwing Hail Marys, where you're basically gambling your way to try to recapture some of that lost profitability. It comes swift, right? These are impulses that just, kind of rapture you. You can't quite break yourself out of it. And then you might get into a spot where you're, what I would describe like desperate, right? You'll do whatever you can to make some money back. And in that mode, that's like the kind of the closest you'll get to pure gambling. At which case you might get rewarded, and there will be times where you're able to kind of right the ship and get yourself back out of that day profitably, sometimes even wildly profitably. But what have you really learned at that point? You've learned that gambling doesn't get punished, but eventually it will. So there's not a lot of benefits that I would see that are gained long term from getting yourself out the wrong way. You're getting kind of the wrong reinforcement. So the boom and bust cycles can be like kind of a slower moving thing, right? That can happen over weeks, both in the buildup and the bust, but they also can happen very rapidly. Certainly within an intraday sort of scenario. So I'm curious. I see a lot of you, kind of posting comments here. Just maybe like a 1 in the chat or a 2. I would say keep it simple. Throw a 1 in the chat if this is something you experience. Throw a 2 in there if this is something that you never go through. But I see a bunch of people coming in here from Nigeria and the Philippines. Great to see a nice worldwide audience. Certainly, I know it's a bit on the later side for you all. So appreciate you showing up here live. So yeah, throw in the chat. Let me know if this is something that you deal with, and maybe elaborate on the way in which you experience it. So if we're going to try to start to break out of these cycles here, and actually get yourself not gambling, then you have several different points within this cycle where you have the opportunity to make some improvements. And so if you're going to stop the overconfidence, you're basically asking yourself to reduce how good you feel, which is strange. I know for many of you that is not necessarily like a normal thought. Like, I'm feeling too good today. Let me try to feel a little bit worse. And I'm not really suggesting it like that, but the implications are kind of in that category, which makes, again, overconfidence so hard to solve, because again, you're in a spot where you're making money, probably doing a lot of the right things, but then it like can veer off quickly. Frankly, I was talking with an institutional trader earlier today who has a difficult time like really being able to differentiate that right level of confidence from when it starts to get excessive. So this is not something that just you all are dealing with. I mean, some of the best traders in the world struggle in being able to not get swept up in those kind of greedy moments. And if you're making a bunch at your level, making a bunch at their level, it still is going to trigger the same kinds of patterning. That's the interesting thing about trading. It's like we are human beings first. That's why these things are so common. So look, if you're going to stop that part of the cycle, you got to get really good at being able to identify like what the difference is, right? Can you, on a sheet of paper, write down the difference between optimal confidence, right, and describe those details where maybe there's a presence, right, a poise, a clarity of mind, energized, right, really present, kind of locked in, engaged, feeling good, right? So description of that solid confidence, right? Really have strong conviction in what I'm seeing. Positions are moving as, you anticipated, you intended, etc. And how do we distinguish that from like maybe big overconfidence or just the sort of subtle versions of it? The subtle versions of it, I think, start to come in where you begin expecting to make money. You begin expecting this next trade to work out. You start dreaming of what you're going to do with a payout, what you're going to do with the money you're going to make, right? You're kind of getting ahead of yourself. You're anticipating a future where you kind of expecting to occur. So you got to have the vision, right? That's the most important thing. Having the vision to be able to see the difference between that optimal confidence and that overconfidence. And it takes a little bit of time to, kind of clearly distinguish those for yourself. The examples I gave kind of give you a good starting point, but frankly, you could right now, if this is a problem for you, just make a few notes down about what overconfidence looks like for you, or throw them into the chat. I would love to see, again, kind of examples of what you're going through. And I do see the question in here from Daniel about how do we reduce the overconfidence? So great question, poignant for what we're talking about here. So number one is you got to be able to see it in real time. Okay, you cannot stop the overconfidence unless you see it, and that's, again, a byproduct of how not aware you are. Okay, awareness, self-reflection, those are tools, but the ability to actually have precise details about what overconfidence looks like for you is really important. And in particular, I would say we're looking mostly for like the thoughts that come to mind, any changes in your physical state. Generally speaking, right, if you're like wildly overconfident, there's a lot more adrenaline coursing through your veins, right? Your heart rate's increased. Maybe there's just a greater kind of pull getting into the markets, like you're just more raptured by things. And again, that's not always a problem, right? But if at that time you are jumping into a position prematurely because you just assume that you can't lose, or because you're playing with a little bit of house money, so if you lose this one, not that big a deal, right? You kind of convince yourself that you won't care about a loss in the future, which we know is wrong, right? You're not gonna be happy about it, and certainly, why would you, take that first step backwards purposely on your own? It doesn't make sense. So that first step of having that vision, seeing some of those thoughts, again, I think the predictive nature of your mind is the kind of the first real thing to look out for. Another way to think about it, you start believing in a lie. That's really what overconfidence comes down to. You believe something about yourself, about your account, your positions, your future, that cannot be true right now. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. Your job is not to know what's going to happen in the future. You're anticipating, you're planning, you're probabilistically looking for opportunities, right? That's the best that you can do. You're not a psychic. If you were psychic, you would not be here. You would not be here. You do not know what is going to happen in the future. But at those times where the mind is starting to get a little excessive, starting to get a little overconfident, you believe that you have the ability to predict the future. You know what's going to happen, or you expect that what you want to happen is going to occur. So that is the kind of the primary way to begin reducing the overconfidence and reducing this part of the boom and bust cycle, is being aware of it and then begin to correct the lie. Like, you just call yourself out for it. It's like, you're expecting to make money today. It's like, I can't expect that. I can attempt as best I possibly can to take the trades that I want. And then when chips are going to fall where they are, we'll see where they land. Right? We don't exactly know what's going to happen. So you got to kind of talk yourself down the ledge. And so again, it's not about reducing the feeling per se. I'm not trying to make you feel worse. I'm just trying to get you a little bit more sober, right? Because overconfidence is kind of like getting high, kind of like getting drunk, where your mind starts to get a little bit fuzzy and a bit detached from reality. So the sobering up is not about feeling bad. It's about being more realistic about what you know to be true right now. Right. So that's a big piece of that first part of the cycle. I do see a few other questions here about overconfidence. So maybe we'll get to those first before we move on to the next part of the cycle here. All right. So Jared's asking, like, what should we do when my strategy has failed multiple times? Listen, I'm not an expert in developing strategy, but I do know that if your strategy is failing, which you're distinguishing from not your ability to execute that strategy. So what you're saying in this question is that you are executing your strategy perfectly, but it's not working. Now, over what time period, right? Are we talking days, weeks? Because if so, that's not a large enough sample, especially if you're in, a moderately high frequency. We're talking like months to like really prove it, which is where, the back testing and sim trading is really advantageous to help you really kind of prove that there is like real edge in the market. You don't want to really go live here unless you know that you have edge. That's a bit of a gamble. I'm not saying you can't do that, but at that point you're in an R&D, research and development phase of your, trading business per se. And if you're taking on that kind of risk where you don't know that the strategy is profitable, that's kind of to your discretion, but not my suggestion. But if you're saying, Jerry, that strategy failed multiple times, then you got to go back to the drawing board. You got to do more research, do more back testing. You got to find people to help you or to really examine why the strategy is failing and what you can do to adjust it. But that's not really my purview of the technical and strategic side of it. All right. I see a question from Nelson here. Is overconfidence always a problem? What about somebody who trusts his system and knows that it'll definitely play out over a given period of time? That's not overconfidence. I mean, I'm not saying what I've described does not negate your question here. Right? Trust in your system and knows that it will, definitely play out over a given time. See, I guess there is a slight overconfidence there. It's slight. Okay. Definitely play out over a given time. You're anticipating. You don't know for certain that it will play out over a given time. You are betting on that from a probabilistic sense. And that probability might be 99% of the time it will play out over a given period of time. But to say it 100%, I don't know that, even the best traders in the world know that per se, right? They're still like open-minded enough to adapt because market structures change, right? People often ask me, like, what's the difference between, because those that don't know, I work with a lot of poker players as well. And people often ask me, like, what's the difference between poker and trading? They are very, very similar. But one of the biggest differences is that in poker, you have fixed variables, right? 52 cards. That's the deck. And there are a couple variations. But the point is fixed variables. In trading, the variables are not always knowable. And they continue to evolve and change. So on one day, you're playing the game one way, and then the market says, nope, we're going to play a different game here. So to say definitely play out over a given time, I would argue is just slightly overconfident. You're betting on that being true, but you can't prove it 100% until it's firmly in the rearview mirror that you have the evidence to suggest that you are able to. All right. I see the question from Raymond. Okay. What's the best way to heal daily over trading, even when I have a set of rules? Okay. So now this is actually getting to the next piece of the puzzle. I want to get to the overconfidence questions first, right? So we talk about those kind of boom and bust cycles. The over trading is what occurs, as things are really getting a lot worse. All right. How can I catch overconfidence early, especially after a winning trade, before it causes me to break my system and force trades? I want to stay confident but grounded. So that goes back to what I was saying earlier. Be very, very detailed about what solid, stable confidence looks like for you. Just take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle. What does solid, stable confidence look like on the right side of that page? On the left side of that page, write down, what does overconfidence look like? How do you know? Now, to catch it early, once you have that second column of like what overconfidence looks like, then you need to have maybe just like kind of the smaller version of that. So you look at, here's what solid and stable confidence looks like. Here's what overconfidence looks like. What's the first kind of deviation in either direction? you might find one or two very distinct criteria. For example, clients of mine in the past have said once they begin to get overconfident, they start looking at P&L more regularly, more frequently. There's a greater attachment to it, a focus on it, even if it's just subtle. Another one might be that you begin to dream about maybe not necessarily what you're going to do with the money, but like how enjoyable the rest of the day is going to be. And again, the surface doesn't sound that bad, right? But you're only going to have those thoughts when you're in a position that your mind is now kind of expecting more good things to come the following day, right? Because why would you allow yourself to celebrate like that if you knew, for example, like tomorrow was going to be a bad day? Like you wouldn't celebrate like that, right? You sober up and prepare for the worst and see how much you could limit that. But you're allowing yourself to, kind of feel overly good because, there's a little bit of anticipation that tomorrow is going to be better. So that subtlety is really, really key. All right. Great question there. Let me see if there's any other questions about overconfidence. All right. Lenti, confidence, overconfidence is a result of the same assumption predicted by your knowledge or knowledge of your experience. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. I would argue that you're wrong. And here's my definition of confidence. Okay. Confidence is an emotion. Confidence is not something solid and stable like skill. And we know this because skill and confidence are not always aligned, right? You have, and I've worked with them, unbelievably successful traders who will have measurably less confidence than newer traders who may be on a win streak. It's like, well, who are we betting on in the long term to make money here? It's like, it's not the newer trader. I'm betting on the one who's made a lot of money and maybe it's just a little bit of a slump, or even frankly just still doing well, but maybe not up to their prior standards. Point is, like, confidence can really be very agile and flowy and change rapidly. Skill does not change very rapidly. Okay, of course you can have days where you feel like you're much more command, but your actual skills haven't measurably changed that much. So the point is that confidence is the emotion that reflects your perception of your skills. Okay? Perception of your skills, perception of your experience, your knowledge, your wisdom, etc. All the things that you're going to go. Now, when you have really solid, stable confidence, I believe you have an accurate perspective on all the work that you've done to date, the value of that experience, that knowledge, and that wisdom. And even if you have very little of it, but you still understand where you are and what you've got, well, you can have solid, stable confidence. Where you have underconfidence, where you're lacking confidence, is now a diminishing and a devaluing, which oftentimes comes in comparisons to others from a P&L standpoint, or even from an experience standpoint, or for yourself. You just have super high expectations, and when you're underperforming, well, then you're not going to feel as confident. Now, overconfidence comes because, yes, now you're making some predictions, okay, about the future, about the value of your knowledge, wisdom, etc., as it plays out in the future. So I think you're correct from an overconfidence standpoint, but from a confidence standpoint, right, that stability is what we're seeking, and to get that is to have a more accurate perspective on our experience, knowledge, and wisdom. But yeah, great question. Is overconfidence also attached to holding a trade to TP? No. I mean, I would argue if you're not able to hold your trade to TP, it's because there's something governing that, very often fear. And so if you're dealing with fear, you might think you need overconfidence to get yourself to actually hold this thing to TP. But the reality is you got to correct the fear, and then removing that fear might help your confidence to become more solid and stable. All right, great questions all there. When we come back now, this other piece of the cycle here, right? So we talked about kind of the build up to it, which is often related to that overconfidence, as I mentioned. The crash comes in. Okay, now the crash comes in a variety of different ways, but the one that happens the most often, the one that is the most intense and severe, is where like one loss and your inability to take one loss, or several, or to take one losing day, especially if maybe your account is more under threat, is then kind of met with some degree of desperation, some degree of revenge trading, some degree of like a hatred of losing, where you're just going to continue to overtrade and try to make the money back. And of course, you just dig yourself a deeper hole. Hey, then you kind of flame out, crash out, and you either have to buy a new account or lick your wounds, take a few days, a week, retool, go back to the sim, try to figure out if your strategy is viable, but it turns out it's more you than the strategy itself. If you could just, not overtrade, take the loss. Yeah. I mean, it sucks, but you'd be able to recover and you wouldn't be blowing accounts. So it becomes confusing as to like what your next steps are. And, a lot of times traders just default more to the strategy. And there's a sense of like, oh, okay, well, if I just learn more, if I refine my strategy, I make my system tighter and tighter and stronger, well, then I'm going to be able to avoid these cycles. And the reality is that you can't really solve a mental and emotional problem with more strategic knowledge. And I say generally because there are circumstances where that's occurring, but in this case, it absolutely is not. Right? It's not for a lack of knowledge. Right? You're not stupid. Right? You're stuck in an intense cycle. And in this kind of lens, right, there are many steps along the way where you have the opportunity to make things better, or at least less bad. And that idea of making things less bad, I think, is a really, really critical one. So if you think about your ability to stop from, just totally blowing an account, let's say, or losing back all of the profits you'd had that were kind of ready for a payout. And I will say that unfortunately, this oftentimes happens when you're like really close to getting an account funded, or reaching your first payout. It's kind of the pressure of those moments, the expectations of those moments, oftentimes make this harder and more likely to occur. Were you able to stop it sooner, you develop much deeper hardiness and strength that I believe is required to be a long-term successful trader. Okay. If you get stuck in that cycle of trying to bail yourself out, allowing a loss and subsequent poor trading to lead to more bad trading in the attempt to try to make back your losses or to correct your mistakes, you are not developing the long-term skills required to be successful. And so even if you were successful today, right, you make a bunch of money back, what do you have? Right? You've actually gotten better at believing your bailouts are going to work. And I believe that is dangerous in the long term. You're going to struggle in the long term. And you might get yourself in a position, you get fully funded, you've got some real good payouts. Now you're actually making really good money here, and you decide to quit your job. But now the pressure is a little bit higher. Now your livelihood's on the line. Maybe you got a family. Now it's even higher. In the background of your mind, you have this idea that you can bail yourself out the wrong way. I am all for doubling down on yourself, doubling down on really good process, and doing the right things with real strong aggression. But in the back of your mind, you've got this, I can gamble my way to success. I can gamble my way to correcting my mistakes. So here you are now with family to provide for, trading's your only income, and you're at risk of blowing the whole thing up, right? Because that thing exists. So my point here is I don't want you to get to that position, right? I want you to firmly remove the option to ever gamble, right? For desperation to ever be a problem. You have the opportunity to, as I like to say, suck less, okay? When you're struggling, when their overtrading is occurring, when that impulsivity is ramping up and you just, okay, you got to find a way to do something different. You got to find a way to be a little bit less bad. And if you come 90% of the way to blowing an account, but you stop yourself, well done. you're building some strength, because it takes a lot of strength to be able to do that. It's hard, right? No one is underestimating how hard that is. And that's why it's so valuable. That's why it is important. That's why to find that hardiness in those really dark, difficult times forges strength that you will use in the future. It's just how it works, right? You make things too easy on yourself. You're not really giving yourself the opportunity to get stronger. And trading demands strength. So the whole point of this sort of down cycle, the bust part of the boom and bust cycle, there are many opportunities to find that point to suck a little bit less. Okay, you got to find it, and even if it means just ripping yourself away from the desk, closing your computer hard stop, just turning the thing off, walking away, coming back in an hour, coming back tomorrow, coming back in a week, right? Well done. You did something different. You built some strength. Now you got repetition, data point number 1. Now your next goal is number 2. Okay, because we know the cycle is going to come again, right? Whether it's not because of overconfidence, let's even say you're doing really well for 3 weeks and there is no overconfidence. You're going to lose money at some point. You're going to have days where you're losing. You're going to have weeks where you're losing. How well can you minimize the damage there? Not from not taking the right trades, but from taking the right trades and eating the losses, understanding that those are a business expense to your trading operation. So that becomes the real challenge here. All right. And that suck less phrase is one that I like, because it's just simple, right? We're not trying to be perfect. We're not trying to be measurably significantly better. We're just trying to be a little bit less bad. And as you build up more of those less bad wins, it gets easier and easier for you to actually do the right thing and to break out of this cycle. So, all right, rant over here. I know there's a lot of questions posing in here. So let's get to it. All right, so Daniel's asking, how does confidence evolve with experience? And how can I fast track the maturity of my trading mindset? Look, confidence, I would say, gets denser and more solid over time. But anybody at any point can have the right confidence, provided that you're accurate in understanding where you are at any given point in time, right? I think the fast tracking of maturity in your trading is really about accuracy, right? The more balanced and patient you can be with where you are, it's just a byproduct of the times, right? We're in an instant gratification world now. And there are just some things you can't get instantaneously, right? Like, again, I go back to muscle because it's a great kind of construct or heuristic for us to understand what it takes to actually build real strength. You can't read a book and get bigger muscles. You can't spend a week in the gym and get bigger muscles. You'll get some bit, but like to really develop the strength that you want is going to take time. So the fast tracking, I think, really is about not going slow. Okay, slow and steady, not the answer, right? The question is, can you be accurate in where you are and take each step as it comes, and not kind of racing off into the future, but really building a solid base for yourself. I like to think of the growth of traders much like a really solid growth chart, of a chart of a growth stock, where there's like these legs up, these periods of consolidation. Maybe there's some slight movement downward, but clearly there's something consolidating. There's something getting hardier and stronger. And then boom, right? There's another big leg up, right? Your development can kind of take that form, right? Too often we just sort of assume it's going to just be this sort of straight line upwards, right? But the movements up and down, that's just kind of part of the puzzle, right? How quickly can you learn from those mistakes, integrate them, correct them, and make them part of it? But like, as you go through each of these different kind of phases in your career, there's a need for a constant evolution, right? So like racing into the future without building the skills needed to deal with that future, I think leaves you vulnerable. That's where the maturity comes from, in my mind. All right, what's our next question here? All right, Crown. What do you advise someone in back testing a strategy for months and losing? Well, works for others. Like if you're back testing a strategy for months and it's losing, but I'm not really certain that I understand how that can occur. Again, my technical and strategic expertise might be limited here, so I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that. But I mean, I would talk to them, find out what it is that you're doing differently. And if it is something mental and emotional, come back next week and I'll be happy to answer it for you. But if it's something technical and strategic, well then, that's not my purview. All right, Brian. I feel like if I see the market moving too much, it's psychologically draining. That's what I learned. Eat losses and turn everything off. I feel that desperation and survival. You're 100% right. Right. The intensity of the markets, the intensity of trading, I think is very much like the intensity of high-level sports, high-level performance in any other industry, right? Frankly, these sessions are draining for me because I'm trying to perform at a very high level. So it's natural for it to be tiring because I'm bringing intensity. Now, when you come into the markets, right, it's physiologically draining because that's what the market demands of you. This is not like watching Netflix. It's not like sitting on the couch, like having a relaxing conversation with somebody, right? The competition is too intense and too wide for that to be the case. So some of, I think, what you're realizing, I would argue, is a fundamental reality of this environment. And it's a big reason, and I said traders dramatically underestimate how much that is true, which I think is a big reason as to why they have a hard time taking time off. What professional athletes, you think about like a game day scenario, right? We're talking maybe 3-4 hours, like 5-6 hours in totality between warm up and the work they're doing afterwards. The actual competition's anywhere between 2 to 3 hours, 2 to 3.5 hours, 4 or 5 hours for golfers. Point is, like, it's contained. I mean, you're talking about trading for 8 hours, 5 days a week. Like, who is competing like that? No professional athletes are doing that. Right? Maybe, you think about like theater performers, right? They're going on stage, every day, 2-3 hours doing a theater performance, but it's still 2-3 hours, right? And they do it so much that it becomes, very easy. There's nothing new about it, right? I'm not saying it's easy in a sense, but my point is, like, it's doable. But traders, 7-8 hours, 5 days a week, plus prep, back testing, weekend work to get yourself ready. I mean, to think that is not draining, to think that you don't need like legit breaks and time off is just completely misguided. And so the problem, right, is that when you allow yourself to really get physiologically drained, your resources to defend against your own emotionality get significantly worse, right? You have a harder time identifying overconfidence, correcting tilt, sucking less, avoiding desperation, getting into the right positions at the right time. Like, all of it gets worse because you don't have the mental energy, much like physically. If I was that kind of drained and burned out, I wouldn't have the physical ability to run as fast, jump as high, whatever it is that is required for that sport. So yes, it is vital that you are taking time off during the trading day. Okay, if you're trading a 1-minute chart for the entire day, I mean, that's something special. Most of you are not doing that. You're talking like 5 15-minute candles, or 15-minute candles, then zooming down into smaller time frames when you got an area of interest, things like that. But the point is, 15-minute candle, man, you could take a break every 15 minutes, and why not? Just stand up, go for a short walk, take a few deep breaths, get some food. Every 15 minutes, you could do that. And yet, who does that? Right? No, it's like the markets just glue you to the screen. Like, you want to be part of the action, adrenaline junkie style stuff, right? And it's tough to rip yourself away. But if you want to be sophisticated, you really want to be sharp for longer periods of time, then it's required. And that, to me, is a very vital skill to develop as a trader. So, great question there, Brian. Awesome, Daniel. Happy to hear that. You've asked a couple good questions here, so I'm glad to see that. All right, Vince. I already established a profitable strategy, and I used it for almost a year, and even used it to pass FundedNext. But since May, it doesn't work anymore. Should I change my strategy and start again? Again, I'm not the best person to answer this because it's more of a strategic, technical thing. But we're talking like May to July, so they're talking like a solid 2.5 months here. When you say not working anymore, does that mean that you are executing it, as well as you were before? If so, then the odds are pretty high that there's going to be some adjustments to make. When I talk about this with traders, who've been successful for long periods of time, like there's a continual adjustments to make, and sometimes the adjustment to make is staying out of the market when they know that their style is not working. Should you start again? I don't think you want to start from scratch. That feels like an overhaul that's not necessary, especially if you've got something that's profitable. Why would you just scrap it? Market cycles go, they come, right? You got to really understand maybe why it was working when it was, and why it's not now. And can you understand what some of those nuances are? Right? There's a lot of that. But to scrap it and start again, maybe to me gives the indication that you might be a little bit too results oriented in terms of your competence and your confidence and how that's being defined, versus like really being sophisticated, understanding that skilled traders evolve, right? Their strategies evolve over time. If that wasn't the case, right, they're building algos. But frankly, even algos are evolving too. Plan B. I'm a good trader until I blow my account. Last time, 15 winning days in a row until first loss that I couldn't accept. It's difficult to accept the losing days and waste of energy. So this is exactly the example that I've been describing today. You got to ask yourself, like, why is it so difficult to accept the losing day? Are you a perfectionist? 15 winning days makes you feel like you kind of crack the code, get a little kind of fantasy that this is how it's going to be forever. I would argue that at some point in those 15 winning days, you're getting overconfident, even if it means in the predictive ability of what's going to come next, right? You should be predicting that a loss is going to come and prepared to deal with it, because those are realities every single day, right? Or I should say they are probable realities every single day. We don't know what's going to come, but the odds are in your favor that a loss is going to happen every single trading day. Okay. Maybe not in your favor, but the odds are there, right? Even if it's 15%. And most of the time it's closer to 50%. Right? So 15 winning days in a row, 15 to 30 winning trades in a row. That means that not that the odds are changing. Okay. Let's not make that mistake, but that the odds are still there. Right. So why is it that you're allowing yourself to believe that a losing trade is not going to come? Now, it's okay to hate losing. I'm not asking you for it to feel good. I'm asking you to be ready for it and have a game plan for what you're going to do. Because for you to say that you're not able to accept the losing day means that you're basically not accepting the realities of trading. And that sounds like classic overconfidence. Right? Allowing yourself to believe that it were possible to not have a losing day, which is basically just a big old fantasy, a wish. Common, very, very common. Nothing I'm saying here is like you're crazy there, Plan B, right? This happens all the time. But there's some wish in there that really has to get corrected. Or again, I've said a few things here, but hopefully one of them will solve this for you. All right, Wakawa, how do you master detachment, those driven by impulses and emotions? So look, there's a lot of different philosophies that are out there. I come from the one that doesn't really believe in detachment. I believe that we're trying to attach ourselves to the right things, and simultaneously then we're sort of not attached to the wrong ones. So look, if you're trying to master a attachment to better thinking, planning, decision making, kind of the higher brain function style of trading, and less from your emotions and impulses, then you have to have greater clarity on what those impulses are, what those emotions are, the situations where they're occurring, why they're occurring, and develop strategies to keep your energy high, your mind sharp, your presence of mind clear, and defend against and correct those impulses and emotions. That is not something that's going to happen instantaneously, right? It's something that's going to happen over a period of time because, again, build muscle, correct problems. These are not instantaneous things. They're repetitive things. So, mastery. How do you master any of those things? I mean, we're talking like 6 to 48 months for mastery. I mean, how do you begin to develop those things? Maybe is a better question. Mastery, that's a big deal, right? How do you master trading? How do you become a master, or not master trading? How do you become a master trader? How do you become a master golfer? How do you become a master public speaker? These are things that don't happen easily. I suspect your question is vastly underestimated, or coming from a place where you're vastly underestimating the amount of time, effort, and energy that is required to actually develop that mastery, to develop the beginnings of it. And that's kind of what I've already laid down here. But part of this, I think, is the adjustment in perspective. I said this in the first session. Okay, sometimes the biggest problem that you all have is not the problems itself, not the revenge trading, not the FOMO, not the boom and bust cycles, but it's your perspective on those problems. That's the biggest problem, right? Your perspective. So if you think that mastery happens or can happen easily, quickly, well, that's the first thing to fix, right? To have real clarity on what's required. And look, yeah, there are examples where it can happen incredibly rapidly. I know sometimes people use like the 10,000 hour rule. It's sort of a, nice, sexy, kind of lingo here. But there was a cool example of somebody who was, violating that thesis of a high jumper who was able to, I forget the details of this, but like within something of the neighborhood of like 150 hours, they became world class at high jumping. Now, obviously, they had a lot of inborn abilities and talents, and it was the application then of those skills to high jumping. But my point is, yes, there are some examples where mastery can happen very rapidly, but generally there's already a lot of competency already, and then the mastery is sort of an application question, right? And so that's the piece here. So, all right, what else we got? All right, Daniel, I realized that the trading addiction is actually a thing, but it's not something people talk about. Can you speak on this? I mean, you can be addicted to anything. I mean, not anything, but there's a lot of things you can be addicted to. So look, trading requires, as I said earlier, right, there's a lot of intensity inherent in the markets. As a result, there is a lot of dopamine that gets generated from being in front of the markets, and addictions oftentimes get developed from infrequent rewards, right? Intermittent rewards. So out of the gate, right? Trading checks the boxes of things that can become addictive very, very quickly. Now, in my mind, to firmly define an addiction from like a trading addiction, a gambling problem, from somebody who is trying to like build a business, like to become a successful trader here, you've got to examine for yourself whether or not the costs of your losses and of this activity is greater than the near-term and or potential benefits, right? So for some of you, you might be, spending money that you can't afford. Well, it may not necessarily have an addiction, but it's just not a smart use of your time. not a smart use of your capital and your money. But if you've got an addiction, well, then you can't really help yourself. You're going to continue to make things worse and are unable to stop it. Now, again, I'm not an expert in addiction, but I think you got to be honest with yourself, whether or not that you have an edge in the market. Because if you don't have an edge, then you're in a research and development phase. Again, totally fine, right? Everybody's got to start somewhere. Every trader begins somewhere. Yeah, like if you don't have an edge, you're in an R&D place. And if you don't know if you don't have an edge or don't care, well, then, yeah, maybe you are getting a little bit caught in that kind of the addictive tendencies of the market. Yeah. Important topic, though. Glad you brought it up. All right, Raymond. How do you stay disciplined when my system says wait, but I feel pressure to take trades after a few quiet days? Like, a lot of you have this faulty idea that taking trades makes you a trader. It's not really how it works. You know, I've heard many say this, so I'm not by any means calling this out as my own. But the reality is, like, you are always in a trade. If you're on the sidelines, you're basically fading the market. So that's it. That's the position that you're in. You're always in a position. You may not necessarily actually be in a trade. So traders are always in positions, and it's okay. Like, you're not waiting. It's okay for those quiet days to be there because you are actually in trades. Now, if it's, you know, the drumbeat of P&L, the drumbeat of making money, and you feel this urge and need to make money, then you got to examine the construction of your life, financial construction of it. And, you know, are you putting undue burdens on yourself to be making money from trading, having undue expectations, leading you to be in a position where you feel like you have to take trades? You know, I would argue you should never have to be in that position. I know sometimes the funding rules are, I don't know exactly all the rules here, but I know sometimes the rules can kind of provide some, you know, pressure there. But outside of that, you know, your ability to recognize that you're in positions when you're not actually in a trade and have certainty around the kind of financial standing should give you the freedom to be able to wait. So it's sort of less of a pure kind of discipline thing per se, and more of an understanding that will allow that discipline to naturally be there. All right, Daniel. How can I handle that inner voice saying I'm better than the markets after a few perfect wins? So this is a classic version of that overconfidence. So good example of this. I'm glad you brought it up. I would actually ask you to describe, and, you know, you want to throw it in the chat. I'd certainly be interested in seeing what you said. What do you actually mean when you say that you're better than the market? I think there's something in there that, you know, would kind of highlight the flaw in perhaps a quite a bigger way. The other side of this, you know, while you're writing this out, because I don't think you're going to touch upon this piece of it, is variance. If you have a few perfect wins, to think that that is all you is a delusion. Okay, you have to have some good luck to have perfect wins where you get into the right time, top tick the market, out, got the max part of that move. You got lucky. Now, how much of it was luck? Hard to say. Doesn't really matter. But it wasn't all you. Right? Just like it's not you when, you know, you get stopped out by a tick. Right? You're in the right spot. Market's going to do that. So there are a wide variety of degrees of individual success in trades. And when you get things perfect, that is not all you. You can't do that. You're not a psychic. So to think that you're better than the markets is basically you discounting the role of variance. And again, we don't have to be black and white here. It's not all variance. It's not all you. It's like a blend, and it's just understanding that that reality, I think, is a vital piece of what it means to be a successful trader. Yeah, and if you throw your comments in there about what you mean by "I'm better than the markets," I'll be interested to see it. And I'm not saying it in a denigrative way. I think it's really important to be able to allow yourself to see the flaws in your mind very clearly. Right, the more you keep in the back of your mind, well, what benefit is that? Right, you don't really get to understand like what you're truly battling against. So let the emotion run here. And allow yourself to be honest about what you're implying when you say that you're better than the markets. Mr. Double R, how do you explain this? After a break, whenever I start trading, I remain profitable for a max 7 days. And after that, I lose the grip and blow my account. It's happened to me 3 times, like the thrice. Maybe we should start calling you Mr. Triple R. All right. I agree. Let's try to break out of this. Here's the deal. And me drinking the water kind of works out quite well. If I stick this under a leaky faucet, eventually it's going to fill up with water. If I dump out the water, thank God I closed it well. If I dump out the water, okay, then this is your mind, right? You want your mind to be empty. So you take a break, your mind gets emptied out, not only of a lot of the data, but also from the emotion of trading. You're refreshed, you've got more energy. But then as you start trading again, it's like sticking that bottle right under that leaky faucet, and it's going to start to fill up. And once it gets to a certain level, you're going to start losing that grip, right? Your ability to think, plan, make decisions decreases. And then once you start making a couple bad ones, probably a bit of desperation is going to kick in, and the blow up is off to the races and somewhat inevitable. So look, you kind of answered your own question here. Like, number one, the simple answer here is take more breaks. And as I was saying earlier, it's essential because it is an intense endeavor. So even if you don't even have like very deep flaws, although I'd argue maybe there are some, even if you didn't have any, taking regular breaks is essential to being able to stay sharp and avoid these kind of mistakes. Now, if you're losing grip and allowing yourself to blow an account, that means you're also not really super aware of the increase in emotion that's occurring and or the decrease in energy that would allow you to continue to trade well, both of which you got to get better at. You got to get better at those subtle signs, either of the burnout or either of burnout might be too strong, just fatigue building. Better at that, better at recognizing the subtle rise in emotions. If you can't do that, you're not able to avoid these problems. Beyond that, like, you can correct the emotionality, you can correct the patterning, but that's going to require some deeper work. My book goes into a lot of depth around that, but I think out of the gate here, just keep it simple, right? Write down a list of examples of what it looks like when you're beginning to get a little bit crusty, tired, fatigued, burned out. What does it look like when those emotions, FOMO, revenge trading, greed, overconfidence, right, starts to rise? Like all of those things, you got to be able to see it in real time and know that you got to, as they build, you're at greater risk. So you got to cut it off quickly, right, and manage it. The pattern's just going to repeat again. Gracias. Thank you. 20 years, man. I've been coaching for 20 years. You add my experience getting educated in my master's program, talking total 25 years, internship, credentialing, etc. So been at this for a long time. And I say that because of the mastery question earlier, right? It's not because I just woke up one day and could do this. And I still am learning. I think patience and being disciplined means one is on their way to success. I think the reason I was hesitating is because I knew there's something like, you can be incredibly patient and disciplined and not have a profitable strategy. So no, I disagree with you firmly, right? And again, that goes back to what I said in the first session. This session, my work is not more important than you having a proven edge. My job is to help you to exercise that edge, to be able to use it, not lose it in the middle of the session. So, because again, you're a human slot machine, meaning the variability, in your execution of it comes from your ability to be disciplined, patient, poised, clear-minded, energized, emotionally balanced, confident. So, if you don't have that proven winning edge, you are a losing slot machine, and no casino on the planet is going to allow that to occur. So, no, patience and discipline does not mean that you're on the way to success. Patience and discipline is one of many components required for success. All right. I see this question from Vincent, and I see a Mr. Double R follow-up. So let's get to that in a second after this. Do you think it's okay to use AI like ChatGPT to identify the current fundamental analysis and identify important news like wars or something, and how it can affect your market? I'm not the best person to answer this question, but like my first instinct is to say no. As an exclusive, right? You want to use it as one of several, sure, but I don't know how up to date ChatGPT is in terms of its database. Now, you might probably know more than I do, but in general, I would say, use it as one, not exclusively. All right, so does this mean I trade for a week straight, then take a break and then start again? No, because you're saying you're blowing up after a week. So you've got to get better at identifying when you need a break, because we don't know when your trading actually is degrading. You're saying it's a week and then you start losing, but it might be a week where you're actually underperforming in several of those days, right? You might be underperforming after 2 days, and then have a day where you still get kind of falsely rewarded, and then days 4 and 5 are kind of back to normal, and then days 5 and 6 or 6 and 7 are bad. Like, no, you got to get better at seeing the signs that you're not in the right state of mind. You don't have the right energy, you're fatigued, or that your emotions are impairing you. That's the first thing. Now, if in the short term you want to look for kind of hard, blunt time periods to trade, I would say trade for 5 days, then take a day or two off. Or trade for 3 days, take a few days off, right? And then come back. Undercut the time period where things are getting bad. But that's a very blunt, imprecise tactic that I'm not really a fan of. But good follow-up question. All right, joining this live was a game changer. Success isn't just about profits, it's about mindset. Yeah, I'd say it's ideally both. Right? The mindset to be able to handle profits. That's an important one too. Good stuff. All right, Juma. I have a proven and back-tested strategy that I've developed and know works, but I find it difficult applying it in the real market condition. So you got to be more specific about like what's actually going wrong there once you get in the real market condition. Right? It's basically like going to the doctor and saying, hey, doc, I'm sick. Or you going to the doctor saying you're sick or not feeling well, and them saying, oh, yes, it turns out that you're sick. Well, thanks. You're kind of yada-yaing, like you're glossing over a very significant chunk of this, right? What is actually happening for you when you're struggling? Because there's a wide variety of things that could be there. Now, I'm going to bet, because in a situation where traders have a difficult time applying in the real market, and I get a question like this, they tend to mean that there's a lot more hesitation and paralysis, and you see things setting up, and you just don't quite have the conviction to be able to trade it. And that that generally means a couple of things. Number one, you've spent way too much time in the sim, way too much time back testing, and you've developed what I would argue is a false confidence. False in the sense that you just assume that you're naturally going to be able to translate what you've done there into the live market. And it's not totally wrong. Like you said, you've got a proven back tested strategy. Like, let's just go use it. But like, the assumption that it's just a copy paste is not real, because you're still a human being doing this. And so you've underestimated your condition, your ability to make that trade. So the expectation is just wrong. So one option is just kind of going back and saying, all right, I admit I was wrong. There's going to be a transition period. Let me see how much better day over day, week over week I can get at applying the strategy. And I'm going to grade myself based on my execution, not on my results in that time period. So, day 1 through day 8, and I say, trading days, I'm at like anywhere between 30 to 60% proficiency in executing the strategy, right? Like, all right, that's pretty crappy, but it's a start. So then, day 9 to, like week over week, trying to just like continue to raise that level, both your own floor and your own ceiling. That's what the transition could look like, just from a pure integration standpoint. But there also might be like additional mental and emotional stuff that you're not really that tuned into yet. So there's a tool I use called a data collection worksheet. Actually, let me see if I can pull it up and share my screen here real quick. You can get this freely available on my website, jaredtendler.com/worksheets. But it's not a very complicated thing. We can kind of cover this pretty quickly here once I get it open. All right, and if we can get that screen share going. It's funny, maybe there is something with my computer. I've had a difficult time doing screen shares recently. Man, that's annoying. All right. It's not a very complicated thing. Here's all you're doing. When I say it's a worksheet, it's just literally you're just trying to take notes on a few key details. Number one, what's the situation where your emotions are deviating? Okay. What's the trigger? What's the trigger? What's the thoughts or emotions that are coming to mind? Maybe I got the screen share here now. Let's see. There we go. Look at that. Beautiful thing. Okay. So this is the data collection worksheet. Okay. Again, like I said, not a very complicated thing. So we're looking at the situation, right? The instrument. What's the trigger? What's the situation? What's the thing that's sparking that? So maybe it's for you, it's actually seeing a position set up, and all of a sudden now your heart rate spikes. What are the thoughts that come to mind in that moment? Okay. Maybe this will fail. What if it reverses? I don't want to lose. What are the emotions? There's a bit of fear, a bit of anxiousness, nervousness. What are the behaviors? Right? Maybe there's like tension in your hands, or you're kind of become hyper focused on the chart and unable to like kind of be unglued from seeing price action. What are the actions that you're taking? Things that you're now doing. And then these last three, which I think are a little bit harder to see because the way it's sort of formatted. Actually, you can see it on this side. What are the change in your decision making, right? So your actual thought process, how does that deviate in terms of making a decision? How does your change in the market, in your view of the market, change? And then what mistakes are you making, right? You can be writing down all of these details, or some of these details, whatever you necessarily see in the moment. You do that in real time over like the next couple weeks. You're going to gain some real good data on what is happening, why it's difficult for you to apply your strategy in real market conditions. Then you'll understand what you're facing. Do your best to correct it. And if you struggle, then come back here next week and let us know where we land there. So, all right, so let's get the screen share over and move on to our next question. Oh, all right. We got a follow from Daniel. Cool. All right. This is what I say when I mean I'm better than market. Actually, it's a surge of confidence I have where I feel like I've cracked the code permanently, mastered the game after a few wins. See, this is why I wanted you to answer this question, right? So many of you have this kind of BS, this kind of crap in the back of your mind, and you're not really going to correct it until you allow yourself to expose, kind of your own crazy here. And so, Daniel, this isn't crazy in an objective sense because I see this all the time. It's crazy how common it is, okay? So when you feel like you've cracked the code permanently, right, you know that that's overconfident because you don't have evidence of it. It's optimistic. It would be cool if it happens, but you don't freaking know yet. You want to have that be historically true. Historically true. Enough evidence to say that you've done it. Now, to truly think that you could crack the code of something like trading permanently is on its own a bit of an illusion because the market's going to continue to evolve. And that's just a reality. So the permanent nature of it suggests that you're kind of succumbing to a little bit of a relic of human development. I would argue it's the same thing that allows kids to believe in Santa Claus. Sorry if that's a spoiler alert for anybody. I believe it's developmentally appropriate for us to believe in magic, right? Magic does exist in the world in real form, just over generations, right? Not days, months, even years, right? Anybody living in the 1800s would see many aspects of our world, not all, obviously, but many aspects of our world as being magic. Here I am talking to all of you from around the world instantaneously. I mean, that is magic, right? To think that you've cracked the code permanently is tapping into that same secret sauce of human nature, but just in a very bastardized, wrong way. It's not the real magic that takes generations to produce. You think you can do it in the snap of a finger after 2 good trades. So that's how we know it's an illusion. So in those moments where you have a couple wins, whether you feel the surge or not, you remind yourself there is no cracking of a code here. If I do, I'm only going to know because I've got a long track record to prove it. Right. Good work there, Daniel. Awesome. Happy to hear that. Glad you're enjoying it. Yeah, so the template, like I said, is freely available on my website, jaredtendler.com/worksheets. You'll see it. Data collection worksheet. I've got a bunch of other templates that you can use there as well, all for free. Let's see. I just posted the link. There you go. Thank you. Any advice for pro traders to get their highest performance? I'd say the biggest one is to be able to distinguish real intuition from fake intuition. Okay, this is a key idea here, and one that I would argue really is not relevant for any of you who are not profitable yet, or who are like profitable, but you're only maybe profitable for like 3 to 6 months. Okay, pro traders, there are going to be times where your senses are going to of like kind of what opportunities there are going to come up in a form of an emotion, right? Where you're going to feel greedy, you're going to feel fearful, and that's going to tell you that maybe there are some like legitimate changes in market structure, or there's some legitimate opportunities, or reasons to get out, right? It's like there's that intuition comes up as a feeling, but there certainly are other times where those emotions come not because of your own understanding of what the market is telling you, but because now you are imprinting your own bias into the market. And being able to firmly distinguish those two things is hard because they both kind of show up as emotions. So that ability to have the vision takes some time to actually articulate out. But I would argue that's one of the most important things for, very serious experienced traders to be able to get better at. And yeah, it's not hard to do. It just takes a little bit of time and self-reflection. All right, looks like we're around 10 minutes left in the session here. So I'm going to get your questions in. We'll try to get to as many as we can here as we finish up. Mr. Double R again. One more question. How many hours a day should I look at the charts? I've seen people glued to the screen all day. Again, I think it's a mixed bag in terms of what we look at. I would say answer this, like, how many hours a day do you believe are required for you to be able to exercise your edge? And that's going to mean less on some days, more on others. But the problem is that on the days where there's less going on, you end up being more glued to the screens, burning energy inefficiently. And then you kind of have less mental acuity, energy, discipline for those days where there is a lot of activity, a lot of opportunity. And so then you like take one loss on that day, and it ends up costing you a lot more because you can't handle the loss. You end up getting into bad positions, and if you had come into that session with a lot better clarity and energy, you would have been able to take advantage of a day that was really ripe for your strategy. So yeah, there's not like hard and fast rules here. The idea that you can say you should be only trading for 3 hours a day, like, doesn't even make sense. Like I have clients who, and again, this is not a hard and fast, I'm just giving an example. Like, they'll come in, spend the first hour and a half seeing what's going on. And if there's not much and they just have a sense of what's going to happen the rest of the day, again, it's a sense. There were times that they were wrong, that they left. Turned out there was opportunity. They could have made money had they stayed there. But probabilistically, the EV of the situation is actually better for them not to be there. Why? Because they're avoiding some of the paper cuts that would have normally occurred. So even those wins would have been offset by even their own losses. Plus, they were able to capitalize better on those big profitable days. So again, yeah, like, you're going to take less time on the charts. You're going to miss stuff. But at what cost? And sometimes it's even profitable for you not to be there. That's the whole point. Right? Trying to figure that out for yourself is what we're after here. Okay. The one habit destroying my long-term success is impatience. Once I conquer that, it's over. Okay, prove it. You might be right. There might be more things for you to learn. And I would argue that there will be more things for you to learn. It's over. Come on. That means you don't have to learn anymore. You're done. That's it. Once you get impatient, once you are properly patient, that's it. Get out of here. I'm not arguing with you that that's not required for you to take the next step. But you're basically saying that there are no more steps for you to take in the future. And that defies the logic of how this game continues to evolve. And if you don't think it's evolving, I mean, you're going to get passed by at some point. I mean, frankly, look, I worked with traders who worked in the pits, right? Chicago Merc, right? 1990s, making more money than they knew what to do with. Variety of reasons, maybe divorce, maybe too much time doing and spending money lavishly. And now here they are trying to get on board with a world that is vastly different in terms of trading. And that's just a small difference, right? So you don't think that things are going to be vastly different in trading in 10 years, 5 years? Maybe not vastly different, but they're going to be different. So yeah, I'd say the first thing that may be destroying your long-term success might be overconfidence. DaCosta, thank you. Very happy to hear that. What distinguishes a pro from an intermediate trader? The pro has more skill. I mean, I think you're looking for some magic elixir. There isn't one. I would say what I've seen very often, like intermediate traders might have this skill, but they just need more time and wisdom to get better. But I would say I've seen a lot of intermediate traders that are stuck, who are much more resistant to working on their weaknesses, much more defensive about issues that they're dealing with, much less willing to look at that stuff and address those problems. The pros are ruthless. Let's go with a kind of a big example here, right? Like the Michael Jordans of the world, right? Best traders in the world the exact same way. But Jordan was ruthless at identifying every single one of his weaknesses and correcting it. Best traders the same way, ruthless at identifying their own weaknesses and correcting them, and continually looking for ways to better themselves. Right? Oftentimes, intermediate traders who are stuck think they've figured it out, think they've found the best way, and are a bit more blind, resistant, hesitant to dealing with the realities of what could make them better. How do elite traders mentally prepare for uncertainty, knowing that no setup is guaranteed? I would say it's less about a mental preparation and more of a deep-seated understanding of that truth. Like your name's Daniel. It doesn't take a lot of energy to know that, right? Gravity exists. The Earth revolves around the sun. 2 + 2 = 4, right? We've got like very basic fundamental ideas that are so deeply entrenched in your mind, they don't require any hesitation or knowledge, right? It's just a part of you. So elite traders don't mentally prepare for uncertainty. They know uncertainty is a part of this game, like they understand that they have to breathe oxygen. It's just a part of living. It's a part of this enterprise, right? And not to mention that their strategy is based around it. They don't need to know what's going to happen in this trade. That's not their job. All right, Fresh David. Very pertinent question. Should you always stick to your RR? Because most of the time you can get a strong quick. This is more technical than is my usage. Very pertinent question for you, but I'm not the right person to answer for you. My question remains on if there's a need to know why M edge works apart from knowing it's just probability. Okay. You're basically asking, like, is there a need to know why your edge works apart from knowing that it's probably like that it basically works? And I would say the more you know why it works, the better you're going to be able to evolve it. If you don't know why it works, or at least more aspects of it, then you'll be more vulnerable to changes in structure and having to kind of work through things then. But not a hard and fast rule. I've worked with plenty of traders who don't understand why things work, but they just allow themselves to continue to like innovate and grow in a very instinctive kind of way. So you don't have to know. All right, maybe time for one more question, two more questions here. A large number of trades and knowing well the specific set of rules to follow each time and a large number of wins, that looks enough to me. Okay. Yeah, I'm not certain what you're asking there. I think try to rephrase it. My last question, how do I manage my trading cycle? Because my trades tend to take weeks, sometimes days before getting to my profit or assuming area of interest, or I'm I'm not certain what you're asking here. I mean, it sounds like you understand what your trading cycle is. So maybe it's more a question of how do you manage yourself in that trading cycle, because maybe you want things to happen faster. Look, do you want to make money or do you want things to happen fast? We know the answer to that, but maybe it's because you're getting caught up in that faster is better, like ethic or ethos. Faster is not always better. Faster is better when it's better, but it doesn't have to be. Faster sometimes can be a lot worse. So, yeah, like what does it really take for you to truly embrace the realities of your trading style? Right? To know it's okay. There are lots of different ways to make money. Right? Lots of ways to make money. Right? And if you're more of a swing trader, then let that be the case. I mean, that's you're making money over the long term, man. You're doing something great. Own that. It's okay. All right. Good stuff, everybody. Solid session here. Lots of good questions. Back next week, same time, same place. So I hope you come with me. I see, there might be a few other questions kind of laying around here, but we can only get to so many in this period of time. So come back next time with some additional questions. Maybe you got some greater clarity on things that you're dealing with. We can help take the next step, right? Because there's no permanence in mastery, right? Mastery is a verb, right? Not a noun. Mastery is an action, not a destination. All right, everybody. Be well. Take care.